And we're back with your daily space weather. First, looking at the sun at 193 angstroms. We see a coronal hole there south of the equator to which the Earth is magnetically connected. This is 7.5 hours of data here. And we see a giant filament also in 304 angstroms here. Up in the north, there's the last 7.5 hours of that filament. Something to keep an eye on throughout the day. And when I say eye on, the pun is intentional. Let's talk about the power grid. Now, we've linked this site below the video. This is a NOAA site showing the U.S. power grid induction. And let's talk about what's going on in California. Well, not only are there a bunch of power outages, gas prices have gone up to $5.49 for regular unleaded. Were you aware that people will kill each other for 1 gallon of gas within 24 hours of the gas pumps running out of gas? Now, grocery stores were empty within 24 hours of the announcement of the intentional power outage by PG&E, an attempt to cover up its own liability, as it's created billions of dollars of liability and appears to be unable to service its own infrastructure. If you're interested in seeing what the outage map looks like, well, we've got links to that below the video also. And here's the scenario. And it's not looking so good. The red areas are 5,000 plus without power. So we see both sides of Sacramento there. Anyway, there's the power outage. Again, links in the description to this below the video. Let's go back to space weather. Talk about the real-time solar wind. You see this ongoing magnetic connection to the coronal hole there, around 180 degrees. Otherwise, very low solar activity, folks. We're not expecting the coronal hole wind stream from that coronal hole for another 2 days or so. The 13th or 14th, we expect that to impact the magnetosphere. Solar wind density very low, 1.36 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed ramping down over the past 12 hours to 449 kilometers a second. There's the data from the ACE spacecraft. You do see some missing data on both. Cosmic ray flux, anyone? And here are the magnetosphere movies. We'll just show you the density and the pressure today, as it's not too exciting. Move that forward and get on with the update. Please leave a comment if you've changed your coffee formulation as a result of our videos. Cheers. As we cover things besides space weather on this channel, folks, and thanks to our new viewers, subscribers, our patrons, etc., here's the geospace magnetosphere movie showing magnetohydrodynamic pressure, and you can see some shifting in the angle. This is like a phi angle shift here. You see the magnetotail is shifting on the equatorial plane view. That's an indication that the plasma coming through is either magnetically shifted or coming in from a different angle. And let's move on to geospace ground magnetic perturbations, and we see a relaxation of these since the last couple of days. If you want to see some spikes, watch yesterday's video and watch Wednesday's video. You'll see some big spikes. Now we've crossed the heliospheric polarity boundary, and we are back on the south pole charged portion of the current sheet. We'll show you in a minute. 10.7 centimeter radial flux still at 68. Solar minimum, but not as minimum as it was, down at 66. There's a continued spikiness in the GOES magnetometer. No surprises there, as this was forecasted, but it is probably going to smooth out now. Let's look at the Gong 2 data. Now this is an hour and 28 minutes old, and you can see the Earth's orange line here, the field force line, is in the red, although there's still a tug-of-war going on, folks, so check it out. There, the green is the North Pole associated charged portion of the current sheet, and the red is the South Pole associated portion of the charged current sheet. Moving on to the electron flux, which is looking pretty nominal levels here. Pretty normal. Probably going to spike a little bit today. We're going to expect to see this go up a little bit possibly up to 10 to the 5th. And there are the relativistic electrons. Pretty calm there, no charging hazards to speak of. X-ray flux still flatlined. We still haven't seen a B-class flare since the 1st of October, yes. And the KP index is at 1, down from unsettled at 4 when we did yesterday's video. And the last 24 hours of earthquakes included a 5.1 at Indonesia. That one just north of the Australian island, continent, whatever you want to call it. That 5.1 at depth heads up there for a larger quake at the surface. Here's a 4.5 at Vanuatu. Followed by, just a few minutes later, a 4.0 in Turkey. The other side of the world, folks. Please leave a comment if you know what an antipode earthquake is. 4.5 at Peru is next on the list. This one coming in at 1726 UTC. As the magnitude 6 and 7 earthquake drought continues, I implore you, please have an earthquake plan. To be an asset, not a liability, when people's buildings begin falling on their heads. And we see a 4.8 out in the ocean northeast of New Zealand. Next, a 4.5 at Colombia. 5.2 at the southern mid-Atlantic ridge, right underneath my head there. And next is a 4.4 at El Salvador, followed by a 4.7. That was at 2211 UTC. That one at Mexico. 4.4 at Papua New Guinea. 4.2 at Alaska, out in the Aleutians. We've seen quite a bit of activity out there recently. 5.1 at the Philippines. 4.9 at Chile. And a 4.1 at the Virgin Islands. That one is at depth. Let's take a look at the location of that one. Just off the east coast of the British Virgin Islands there. Heads up there for a larger quake at the surface, as that quake was at 128 kilometers depth. Here are the pressure maps. By the way, windy.com has a fantastic mobile app. It's free. Check it out, windy.com. And you see that cold air being injected into the north-central U.S. If you've got crops growing, please harvest them, as the snow is already falling in a lot of spots. Here's where pressure will be in about 24 hours from the making of this video. And let's move on to more stuff. Technical difficulty there. And volcano rundown for October 11th, Friday, includes Etna producing a 4,000-meter volcanic ash cloud. So over 12,000 feet there for Etna. Uptick in the Mediterranean Sea. That one located on Sicily. Mount Abico producing a 14,000-foot plume. Mount Aso, 6,000-foot ash plume there. Sakurajima back to exploding. 6,000-foot ash plume there. Tokono, continuous emissions, 7,000-foot ash plume. Popocatépetl, producing a bunch of earthquakes there. 567 minutes of tremor as the activity continues at moderately high levels. Sangay, not sure if that one's erupting yet or not. Revenador, 15,000-foot ash plume there, as well as explosive activity, just like Sabancaya, where there's a 25,000-foot ash plume. Also Copahu, continuous emissions there, and intermittent emissions from Nevados de Chilean. Please do not attempt to do the Fosbury flop over Nevados de Chilean. And here's the ionosphere map. We're looking at 6 hours of data here, courtesy of Australian Government Bureau of Meteorology. We see some unsurprising discharge on the nighttime side here, as well as some significant charge up on the daytime side there, once again over the Western Pacific mainly. You're going to see that go up to 14 megahertz there. Look for the gray. And there's the gray charge up. And you're going to see the red discharge of the nighttime side right there. That was at 5:15 UT. Let's bring up the latest image and move on with the update. There was a situation in the ionosphere at 7:45 Universal Time. Here's where stuff is in the solar system. We are approaching a transit of Mercury, folks. It should be exciting. We'll show you some great images of that when it happens, as the Earth sneaks up on Mars and Mercury and Venus sneak up on the Earth. There's where things will be in 1 week, God willing. And here's where stuff is above my head right now. It's only 3:29. The moon's about to set. Check out in-the-sky.org if you want to make yourself a star chart. I like it. I like to draw in the ecliptic and face mine south, as I'm currently facing south the same way my sofa faces, coincidentally. Lightningmaps.org is showing us some lightning off the coast of New Jersey once again. Looks like a significant cell out there. Please leave a comment if you are a hunk on a boat with Marky Mark Wahlberg and or George Clooney. Also, we see some heavy convergence here over Texas. And shout out Waco! There is thunder rolling in. Lightningmaps.org. Looks like it's moving to the northeast, folks. And your real-time lightning map brought to you by me at massive personal expense. And we'll play the Weather Underground value-added service, the animation of the U.S. Doppler radar situation. And it looks like there's some Yeti activity going on there in northeastern Montana. See that circular area of snow? That's probably a portal through which Sasquatch and Yeti are changing places. Sasquatch are getting out early this year, and they're being replaced with their snowy counterparts, the Yeti. Heavy snow falling in North Dakota already, as well as a significant band of snow going across Kansas, wintry mix into Iowa. Let's zoom in on that spot over. Let's zoom in on a couple spots, actually. But first, let's talk about harvesting your gear. If you've got food growing outside, by Monday morning, some areas are going to be covered by feet of snow once again. North Dakota. The entire state of Minnesota will almost be totally covered with snow, as well as South Dakota, North Dakota, large portions of Wyoming, Colorado, and Kansas. Let's zoom in on the area over Texas first, where we see massive pressure gradients and a bunch of lightning sprouting up. There's the water vapor situation there. That thing is barely moving. It's actually moving southeast a little bit. Heads up Louisiana in the north. There's moisture headed your way. And here's the zoomed out water vapor map. We're going to look at the Minnesota-Wisconsin border here in a minute. But first we're going to look at this area off of Cape Cod, where there's sudden cloud nucleation happening. Check out that convergence zone. As that water tries to rotate counterclockwise, all of that dry air is trying to rotate it clockwise, and we're going to see massive pressure gradients. Any planes flying across these areas are going to experience multiple bouts of turbulence, to say the least. And lastly, here's this area where a bunch of frigid air is being injected. And when I say frigid air, I don't expect copyright infringement problems, because this is not about refrigerators. Although, some of these folks aren't going to need them, because if their power goes out, they could just put things outside. Now, a lot of this snow is expected to be followed by extreme cold temperatures, which are dipping all the way down to Mexico. And let's move on. Now, you see this extreme meridional jet stream flow. We're pulling Arctic air all the way down into the U.S. The jet stream making this 180-degree turn over a matter of only a couple hundred miles there. In fact, these convergences are so close here that they're about 200 miles apart. Let's look at the rest of the western jets. And there are the western jets. Extreme meridional jet stream flow continues, folks. Cyclonic system here in the South Atlantic, and very powerful jets in the southern hemisphere. Let's look at the eastern jets. center it over India and move on to more stuff, as there's still a couple more items to cover on today's video. Today's vidya. Now, we've only been making one video a day because of time constraints, so welcome to the That is Censored and That is a Sinkhole, where we talk about whatever we want. Now, astronomers do not understand whether or not the Milky Way galaxy, or the Sun, or the Earth, or the solar system, or the universe as a whole are gaining or losing mass. One of the ways we're trying to figure it out is by measuring redshift from quasars, blasting through intergalactic clouds. And it turns out that it looks like, according to this study, that the Milky Way galaxy is taking in more matter than it's spitting out. Now, it seems to be a mystery as to whether or not supermassive, quote, black holes, and, quote, the massive radio sources at the center of galaxies act like fountains, or do they act like vacuums? Are they sucking up matter all the time? Or are they producing repulsive forces? We're not exactly sure, since we can't really see what's going on in those areas. However, there's lots of conjecture, and I would remind you, folks, that not only are the links below the video in the description, but that black holes are a bunch of math based on relativity searching for observations. Many of you may have heard about the Chilean fireballs. Well, it turns out that they appear to not be meteorites. None of the 7 sites contain traces of meteorite, so we're thinking that they might be space junk. The likelihood that they're extraterrestrial spacecraft is pretty low, folks. Links to this video also, links to the article below the video. That's what's up. In any case, please like and subscribe on YouTube, as we even put up videos with including recipes for tuna noodle casserole occasionally, like we did last night, showing off our gigantic goldfish. And please support the channel via Patreon, as Patreon is the real funding of this channel, not YouTube. YouTube pays us precisely nothing for these videos, so become our next patron and receive some updates before everybody else. And thanks, Smash Team, for tuning in. Stay tuned for one bonus feature. And it's 7.5 hours of the local yellow dwarf at 171 angstroms. South Pole coronal hole looks highly offset to the east, first of all. Secondly, we do see a little bit of activity down here as this plage region sets. And here's the filament we looked at earlier in 304 angstroms. Thanks again for tuning in, everybody. Please support the channel via the links below the video, whether you're buying Hemp Lucid CBDs via our Spaced Out campaign, via our affiliate link, or if you're supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. We appreciate it. We need more funding, and we intend to continue to grow this operation, as it will never stagnate. We will continue to reinvent this channel constantly. Thanks again, folks. Remember, when you're staring at the sun, don't drink. And if you drink, stare at the sun anyway. Just don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, may the solar wind be at your back and the atherosclerosis absent from your veins.